Dusk cloaks a coastal town, where waves murmur secrets in a tiny restaurant. Aglow with candlelight, pulses with dreams. A 29-year-old black chef, her heart woven into every dish, was betrayed by her fiancé, who craved a starlet's fleeting fame over her soulful brilliance. Cast aside for glamour, she vowed to forge her own crown. Imagine a dazzling ballroom, her crimson dress blazing as she claims a culinary throne. Her sharp words slicing through the starlet's facade, leaving the crowd breathless. Her betrayer, once chasing hollow stardom, stands frozen, his world in ruins as her fire illuminates the night. How did she rise from heartbreak to reign supreme? What hidden sparks fueled her ascent? Stay tuned to unravel her triumph. Hit subscribe for more gripping tales and comment, where are you watching from? Her story will ignite your soul, the truth awaits. The city skyline glittered like a crown of shattered stars, its lights pulsing against the velvet night. High, above, in a penthouse of sleek glass and polished chrome, a VIP party hummed with the clink of champagne flutes and the murmur of ambition. Chandeliers cast golden webs across the crowd. Music producers, influencers, and socialites draped in silk and swagger. At the heart of it all stood Martha, 29, a black woman whose quiet grace seemed to soften the room's sharp edges. Her deep, brown skin glowed under the lights, her natural curls swept into an elegant updo, and her hand-stitched navy dress, sewn with love over sleepless nights, hugged her frame like a whispered promise. A fire-shaped earring, a gift from her grandmother, glinted at her ear, catching flecks of light like a spark waiting to ignite. She moved through the crowd with a chef's precision, her smile warm but guarded, her eyes scanning for Walter, her fiancé of 2 years. Walter, 32, a music producer with a jawline carved for magazine covers, had insisted she attend tonight. "It's our world now, babe," he'd said, his voice smooth as the bourbon he sipped. But as Martha navigated the sea of strangers, a knot tightened in her chest. Walter was nowhere to be seen, and the glances she caught, some curious, others dismissive, made her feel like an outsider in a kingdom she hadn't been invited to rule. She found a quiet corner near a floor-to-ceiling window, the city sprawling. Below, like a map of dreams, her fingers traced the earring, its tiny flame a reminder of her grandmother's words. "Cook with your soul, child, and no one can dim your light." Martha clung to that now, her heart steady despite the unease. She was a chef, not a socialite, her hands more at home with a knife than a cocktail glass. But for Walter, she'd stepped into this world, believing their love could bridge the gap. The music shifted, a sultry bass line giving way to a hush as Walter strode to the center of the room, a microphone in hand. His tailored suit gleamed, his smile a polished weapon. The crowd parted, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Martha's breath caught. He looked like a king claiming his throne. But then she saw her, Sasha, 23, a singer with a cascade of platinum hair and a dress that shimmered like liquid starlight. She stood beside Walter, her hand grazing his arm, her lips curled in a knowing smirk. The knot in Martha's chest twisted, sharper. "Ladies and gentlemen," Walter began, his voice a velvet blade, "tonight's special, not just for the music, but for a truth I've been carrying." The room leaned in, phones raised to capture the moment. Martha's pulse quickened, her fingers tightening around her clutch. Was this the proposal she dared to dream of? Her eyes locked on Walter, searching for the man who'd once whispered promises over late-night dinners she'd cooked. He turned, his gaze finding her across the room, but it wasn't love in his eyes. It was something colder, sharper. "Martha," he said, her name a dart thrown with precision. "You've been my anchor, but anchors hold you back." A murmur rippled through the crowd, head swiveling to her. She froze, the air thinning around her. "I'm done with small-time dreams," he continued, his voice rising. "You're a cook, Martha, a baker of bread, not a star. I need someone who shines." He gestured to Sasha, who raised her champagne, glass, her laugh a sparkling shard. "Sasha's my future. We're done." The room erupted in gasps, whispers slicing through the air like knives. Martha stood rooted, her dress suddenly feeling too tight and exposed. Eyes bore into her, some pitying, others amused. Sasha stepped closer to Walter, her voice a mocking lilt. "Sweetie, stick to your little kitchen. This stage isn't for you." Laughter bubbled up, cruel and sharp, from the crowd's edges. Martha's cheeks burned, but her spine stayed straight, her grandmother's earring a tiny pulse of heat against her skin. From the crowd, a voice rang out. Amara, Martha's best friend, her round face fierce with fury. "You're a fool, Walter," she shouted, pushing forward, her baker's hands clenched. "You're throwing away a diamond." "For glitter." The crowd hushed, but Walter waved her off, his laugh cold. "Amara, save it, Martha knows her place." Sasha giggled, leaning into him, her eyes daring Martha to crumble. But Martha didn't crumble. Her heart thundered, a storm trapped in her chest, yet her face remained a mask of calm. She stepped forward, the crowd parting like a sea. Every eye was on her, waiting for tears, for weakness. She stopped a few feet from Walter, her gaze locking with his. The room seemed to hold its breath. "You think you know me?" she said, her voice low but steady, each word a spark. "You'll see who I am." She turned, her dress swirling like a quiet rebellion, and walked toward the exit. The chandelier's light danced across her back, her fire earring blazing with each step. Whispers followed, but she didn't falter. Walter's smirk flickered, a crack in his armor, but Sasha's laughter chased it away. Amara rushed to Martha's side, her voice a fierce whisper. "You're bigger than this, girl, show them." Martha nodded, her eyes glistening but resolute. Outside, the city's pulse swallowed her. She climbed into a cab, the penthouse's glow fading behind her. Alone, she pressed her hand to her earring, tears finally spilling. The driver glanced back, his voice kind. "Rough night?" She managed a smile, her voice soft but firm. "Just the beginning." At home, in her small apartment, Martha lit a single candle. Its flame danced, fragile but unyielding. She opened her recipe book, her fingers tracing recipes born of love and loss. "This is my beginning," she whispered, her voice a vow to the night. The fire in her earring, in her heart, flickered brighter, ready to burn. The sea sang a restless lullaby, its waves curling against the cliffs of a sleepy coastal town. Dawn painted the horizon in strokes of amber and rose, casting a soft glow over a narrow street where a small storefront stood, its red brick walls weathered but proud. A hand-painted sign read, "Soul Fire," the letters bold yet tender, like a promise carved in hope. Inside, Martha, 29, moved with a chef's quiet grace, her deep brown skin catching the light of a single lantern. Her navy apron was dusted with flour, her natural curls tied back, and her fire-shaped earring, a gift from her grandmother, swayed gently as she kneaded dough. The sting of past rejection lingered, a bruise on her heart, but here, in this tiny kitchen, she was building something new, something hers. Martha had left the city 3 months ago, trading skyscrapers for salt air and silence. The town, with its cobblestone paths and skeptical locals, was a far cry from the glittering world she'd fled. She'd rented this space with her savings, every cent a bet on herself. The kitchen was cramped, the oven temperamental, but she'd transformed it with touches of home. A string of fairy lights, a potted basil plant, and a mural she'd painted late one night, a swirling flame that seemed to dance on the wall. Soul Fire wasn't just a name. She vowed to burn brighter than the pain Walter and Sasha had left her with. Her days began before dawn, hands shaping jollof risotto and yam tarts, each dish a fusion of her African roots and modern flair. She poured her soul into every plate, but the town wasn't easily won. Locals passed by, their glances curious but cautious, their whispers sharp. "Another city dreamer who'll fail by spring." Martha heard them, felt their doubt like a weight, but she kept cooking. Her hands, steady as they chopped okra, hid the tremble of fear that Walter was right, that she was small time, that her dreams were too big for her reality. Money was tight. Bills piled on her counter, their red ink a silent threat. She'd sold her engagement ring, a glittering relic of Walter's promises, to buy the last of her equipment. Nights were long, spent scrubbing counters and balancing books, her eyes heavy but unyielding. One evening, as the sea roared outside, she sat at her prep table, a single candle flickering. She opened her grandmother's recipe book, its pages worn and stained, and found a letter tucked inside. "Cook with your soul, child," it read, "and your fire will light the world." Martha traced the words, tears welling. "I'm trying, Nana," she whispered, her voice a fragile spark. Hope arrived unexpectedly, wearing the face of Amara, her best friend from the city. Amara burst through the door one rainy afternoon, her round cheeks flushed, her baker's hands clutching a basket of scones. "Girl, this place is magic," she declared, her laughter warming the room. She tasted Martha's peanut stew, her eyes widening. "This is your heart on a plate, you've got to share it." Martha sighed, her shoulders heavy. "Who'd care, Amara? I'm nobody here." Amara's gaze sharpened, fierce as it had been at the penthouse. "You're Martha, that's enough. Send your menu to a critic. I know one." Martha hesitated, doubt gnawing, but Amara's faith was a lifeline. She nodded, handing over a handwritten menu, her fingers trembling with possibility. Weeks passed, and Soulfire remained quiet, its tables half empty. Martha cooked through the silence, her fire earring glinting as she plated dishes for the few who came. Then one morning her phone buzzed, a notification lighting up the screen. A blog post titled "Soulfire, a coastal gem that feeds the soul," had gone viral. The anonymous writer raved about her jollof risotto, calling it a love letter in every bite. Comments flooded in, praising the warmth of the space, the depth of the flavors. By noon, a line formed outside, locals and tourists alike, their chatter a hum of excitement. Martha stood behind the counter, her apron streaked with sauce, her heart racing. Was this real? That evening, as the last customer left, Amara returned, her grin sly. "You saw the post?" she asked, leaning against the counter. Martha nodded, still dazed. "Who wrote it? They changed everything." Amara's eyes twinkled, her voice soft but proud. "I sent your menu to my critic friend, told her to dine incognito. The rest was all you." Martha's breath caught, tears spilling as she pulled Amara into a hug. "You believed in me when—" "I didn't," she said, her voice thick with gratitude. Amara squeezed her back. "Always will, girl. This is just the start." The mural's flame seemed to glow brighter as Martha locked up, the sea's song softer now, like an embrace. She stood outside, the night air cool against her skin, her earring a quiet pulse of heat. The blog post was a spark, but the fire was hers, born of pain, fueled by love. She didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in months, she felt it. Possibility. The town's lights twinkled and Martha smiled, small but fierce. "This isn't the end," she whispered, echoing her vow from the city. The fire in her heart burned steadily, ready to blaze. The city never slept, its neon veins pulsing through the night, but in Walter's penthouse, high above the chaos, the air felt stagnant, heavy with unspoken failures. The glass walls once, a symbol of his triumph, now reflected a man unmoored. Walter, 32, sat slouched on a leather couch, his tailored suit wrinkled, his jaw shadowed with stubble. A half-empty whiskey glass rested in his hand, the amber liquid catching the cold glow of a single lamp. The penthouse was silent, save for the faint hum of the city below and the ghost of Sasha's laughter, now a memory from earlier, fleeting evenings. 6 months had passed since he'd shattered Martha's heart at that glittering party, trading her quiet strength for Sasha's dazzling spotlight. But the spotlight was fading, and Walter was beginning to see the cracks in his carefully curated world. Sasha, 23, was a comet, brilliant, fleeting, and impossible to hold. Her debut album, bankrolled by Walter's dwindling fortune, had flopped, its reviews as brutal as a winter storm. "Style over substance," one critic sneered, and the words clung to Walter like a damp cloth. His production company, once a beacon in the music industry, teetered on the edge, investors pulling back as debts piled like unopened letters. Sasha, undeterred, filled their days with demands, private jets to Miami, diamond chokers, parties that burned through cash faster than her fleeting fame. Tonight, she was at another club, Her Instagram live a kaleidoscope of strobe lights and fake smiles, her voice shrill as she hyped a new era. Walter watched the stream on his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen, but her eyes, even through the filter, felt distant, empty of the fire he'd once mistaken for love. He scrolled past her post, and there it was, a magazine cover. On his feed, the headline bold, "Soulfire, the coastal chef redefining culinary art." Martha's face stared back, her deep brown skin radiant, her smile soft but fierce, her fire-shaped earring glinting like a challenge. The article praised her restaurant, Soulfire, calling it a sanctuary of flavor and soul. Walter's chest tightened, a pang he couldn't name. He opened a burner account, one he'd made weeks ago, and clicked through her Instagram. Photos of packed tables, vibrant dishes, and Martha laughing with customers filled the screen. She was thriving, a star in a world he'd never believed she could claim. He lingered on a video of her plating jollof risotto, her hands steady, her voice warm as she spoke to a guest. The Martha he'd mocked was gone, or maybe she'd always been this and he'd been too blind to see. The city's pulse taunted his stillness. He grabbed his keys, needing air, needing something to drown the thoughts circling like vultures. He drove to a quiet cafe on the city's edge, a place he'd once visited with Martha. Its wooden tables and soft jazz a stark contrast to Sasha's neon world. He ordered a black coffee, the steam curling like a memory, and sat by the window, the glass cool against his palm. Then, like a twist of fate, she walked in. Martha, her navy coat dusted with rain, her curls loose and glistening. She was alone, a notebook in hand, her fire earring catching the cafe's warm light. Walter's breath hitched. She hadn't seen him, not yet. He stood, his voice unsteady. "Martha?" She turned, her eyes meeting his, and for a moment time folded. But her gaze was steel, not the soft warmth he'd once known. "Walter," she said, her tone flat, a wall he couldn't climb. He forced a smile, grasping for charm. "Heard about your restaurant. Sounds impressive." Her lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. It was a blade. "You don't get to care now," she said, each word deliberate, slicing through his pretense. Before he could respond, the cafe door swung open and Sasha stormed in, her platinum hair a beacon, her voice sharp. "There you are, I just landed." "Collab, huge deal." She barely glanced at Martha, her eyes flicking dismissively. Martha didn't flinch. She placed a $50 bill on the counter, a note scrawled on the receipt. "For your next apology." She walked out, her silhouette fading into the rain, leaving Walter clutching the paper, his face pale. He sank back into his seat, the cafe's jazz now a mournful hum. A man at the next table, a grizzled music producer with graying hair, leaned over, his voice low. "That was Martha, right? Your old muse?" Walter stiffened, his jaw tight. The producer chuckled, oblivious to the wound. "She used to sit up with you, sketching song ideas when you were broke. Shame you let her go." The words landed like a fist, each one a reminder of the nights Martha had believed in him, her laughter a melody he'd forgotten. He'd been a musician then, raw and hungry, and she'd been his anchor, his fire. Now he was drowning in a sea of his own making. Back in the penthouse, Walter stood by the glass wall, the city's lights blurring through his reflection. Sasha's latest post played on his phone, her voice a tinny echo, but he didn't hear. It Martha's earring, her steady hands, her world ablaze without him. The whiskey glass trembled in his grip, the amber liquid spilling like his fading dreams. He'd thought he'd won, trading depth for dazzle, but the truth was a cold mirror. He was fading and Martha was rising. The city hummed on, indifferent as a crack formed in Walter's heart, too deep to ignore. The coastal town woke under a veil of mist, its cliffs kissed by waves that whispered secrets to the dawn. Soulfire, Martha's restaurant, stood like a beacon on the narrow street, its red brick walls warmed by morning light, the mural of a swirling flame glowing as if alive. Inside, Martha, 29, moved with a chef's quiet fury, her deep brown skin glistening with sweat, her natural curls tied loosely under a scarf. Her fire-shaped earring, a gift from her grandmother, swayed as she chopped yams, each slice a defiance, against the pain of past doubts. The viral blog post had transformed Soulfire from a quiet dream into a destination, its tables now filled with locals and tourists craving her jollof risotto and peanut stew. Yet, as Martha's star rose, shadows loomed, doubts, debts, and a venomous whisper threatening to snuff out her light. The restaurant buzzed with life, its fairy lights casting a golden haze over wooden tables, the air thick with spices and laughter. Martha darted between the kitchen and dining room, plating dishes with a precision that belied the chaos within. Her success had drawn attention. A letter arrived, its crest gleaming, inviting her to the International Culinary Awards as a nominee for Breakout Chef. She'd pinned it to the wall beside her grandmother's recipe book, its words a spark in her chest. But success was a fragile flame. Bills still lingered, their red ink a quiet menace, and the town's initial skepticism had softened but not vanished. Some locals whispered, "She's just a fluke," their words sharp as salt in a wound. Then came the storm, not of weather, but of malice. Martha woke one morning to a flood of notifications, her phone screen a battlefield of hate. A viral post traced to Sasha's fan account claimed, "Soulfire's chef bought her fame," accusing Martha of bribing critics for her nomination. Comments poured in, vicious and faceless. "Fraud! Overrated!" Martha stood frozen. In her kitchen, the words clawing at the confidence she'd fought to rebuild. She clutched her fire earring, its warmth a faint anchor, but doubt crept in. Had she risen too fast? Was she, as Walter once sneered, small time after all? She pushed through the day, her smile strained as customers chatted, oblivious to the war in her heart. Amara, her best friend, arrived at dusk, her baker's hands dusted with flour, her eyes blazing. "Sasha's behind this," she said, slamming her phone on the counter, showing the post's origin. "She's jealous, girl. You're outshining her little spotlight." Martha shook her head, her voice low. "It's not just her. People believe it. What if they're right?" Amara's laugh was a spark, fierce and unyielding. "Right? You cook with your soul, no one can fake that. Keep burning, Martha." Her words were a lifeline, but the weight of the rumors clung like damp fog. The real blow came days later, a week before a major catering event for the town's annual seafood festival, a chance to cement Soulfire's name. Martha had planned a fusion banquet, yam tarts, grilled prawns with a goosey sauce, a celebration of her roots and her future. But her main supplier, a gruff fisherman who'd barely warmed to her, called at dawn. "Deal's off," he growled. "Heard you're a fraud. I don't work with liars." The line went dead, leaving Martha staring at her phone, the kitchen's silence deafening. Without his seafood, the banquet was doomed, and with it, her chance to prove the rumors wrong. She sank to the floor, the mural's flame looming like a taunt. But Martha wasn't built to break. She stood, her fire earring glinting, and grabbed her keys. "Not today," she whispered, her voice a vow. She drove through the night, the coastal road winding under a starless sky, her headlights cutting through the dark. She bartered with a rival supplier 2 towns over, her charm and desperation winning a last-minute deal. Exhausted, she loaded her truck with crates of prawns and crab, her hands trembling but resolute. On the drive back, she pulled over, the sea's roar a mirror to her heart. She clutched her earring, recalling her grandmother's letter. "Your fire will light the world." "I'm enough," she said aloud, the words a spark reigniting her soul. The festival dawn broke golden, the town square alive with music and color. Martha's banquet was a triumph, her dishes a symphony of flavor that silenced doubters. Locals who'd once scoffed now lined up, their plates piled high, their murmurs now of awe. "This is unreal," one said, his voice hushed, as if tasting magic. Martha moved through the crowd, her apron stained but her smile radiant, her fire earring catching the sun. Amara, serving tarts beside her, whispered, "Told you, girl, you're a flame they can't touch." As the festival wound down, the man approached, his salt and pepper hair framing a kind face, his suit understated but sharp. "Martha?" he asked, his voice warm. "I'm Raphael, a food critic. I dined at Soulfire last month, incognito. Your risotto, it's genius." Martha blinked, her heart racing. Raphael smiled, handing her his card. I told Amara you're the real deal. Those rumors? Lies. You'll prove it at the awards. He walked away, leaving Martha clutching the card, her eyes glistening. Amara grinned, nudging her. See? The world's catching up to you. That night, Martha stood alone in Soulfire, the dining room quiet, the mural's flame glowing under fairy lights. The rumors still stung, the supplier's betrayal still echoed, but she'd faced them, fought them, and won. She touched her earring, its heat a quiet promise. The awards loomed, a stage where her fire would burn brighter than ever. She didn't know what lay ahead, but the spark in her chest was now ablaze, unyielding and fierce. The sea sang softly, outside, and Martha smiled, her voice a whisper to the night. This is my time. The city shimmered under a canopy of stars, its grand ballroom a cathedral of light and ambition. Golden chandeliers dripped like molten honey, casting a warm glow over velvet-draped tables and the hum of anticipation. The International Culinary Awards buzzed with the elite, chefs, critics, and tastemakers clad in silk and sequins, their laughter a delicate dance over clinking glasses. At the edge of this glittering world stood Martha, 29, a black woman whose presence commanded the room without a word. Her crimson dress flowed like a river of fire, its fabric catching the light with every step, her natural curls cascading in, soft waves. The fire-shaped earring at her ear, her grandmother's gift, gleamed like a beacon, a spark that had carried her through betrayal and doubt to this moment. A year after Walter's cruelty, Martha was no longer the woman he'd mocked. She was aflame, and tonight she would burn. The ballroom pulsed with energy, its stage framed by a massive screen flashing names of nominees. Martha sat at a table near the front, her hands steady but her heart racing. Raphael, the food critic who'd championed her, sat beside her, his salt and pepper hair catching the light, his smile warm and steady. You belong here, he whispered, his voice a quiet anchor. Martha nodded, her fire earring glinting as she scanned the room. She felt the weight of eyes, some curious, others skeptical, a few still poisoned by Sasha's vicious rumors that she'd bought her nomination. But she'd faced worse. The memory of Walter's penthouse, Sasha's smirk, and the supplier's betrayal fueled her resolve. Soulfire had risen from those ashes, and so had she. Across the room, Walter sat rigid, a VIP guest in a tailored suit that couldn't hide the shadows under his eyes. His production company was crumbling, his dreams unraveling like thread. Sasha, beside him, glittered in a silver gown, her platinum hair a crown, but her smile was brittle, her eyes darting to the cameras. She'd spent the week fanning rumors about Martha, her posts a venomous attempt to dim a star she couldn't outshine. Walter's gaze drifted to Martha, her crimson dress a stark contrast to the cold glass walls of his penthouse. He'd seen her rise through magazine covers and social media, each glimpse a knife to his pride. Now, seeing her here, radiant and untouchable, something in him cracked, a pang not of love, but of loss for what he'd thrown away. The host, a suave man with a velvet voice, took the stage, his words a drumroll of anticipation. Tonight we honor the bold, the visionary. Our next award, Breakout Chef. The screen flashed names, and Martha's appeared paired with a photo of her plating jollof risotto at Soulfire, the mural's flame glowing behind her. The crowd murmured, some clapping, others whispering. Martha's breath caught, her fingers brushing her earring, its warmth a silent prayer. Raphael squeezed her hand, his eyes steady. This is yours, he said. The host opened the envelope, his smile widening. Martha Coleman, Soulfire. The room erupted, applause thundering like a storm. Martha stood, her crimson dress flowing, her curls bouncing as she walked to the stage. Cameras flashed, capturing her grace, her fire earring a spark under the spotlight. She took the award, a sleek glass flame, and stepped to the microphone, her voice clear and unshaken. I cook for souls, not spotlights, she said, her words ringing through the ballroom. This is for every dreamer told they're too small. Too ordinary, your fire is enough. The crowd rose, their ovation a tidal wave, drowning out the whispers of doubt. Martha's eyes glistened, but her smile was fierce, a flame that wouldn't flicker. As she descended the stage, Sasha stood, her silver gown catching every eye, her smile a calculated mask. She approached Martha, phone raised for a selfie. Her voice syrupy. "Congrats, darling, let's share this moment." The crowd watched, sensing the tension. Martha paused, her gaze locking with Sasha's, her fire earring glinting like a warning. "My kitchen doesn't serve those who lack taste," she said, her tone sharp but serene, each word a dart. Gasps rippled through the room, cameras flashing as Sasha's smile froze, her eyes narrowing. She stepped back, clutching her phone, her laughter a hollow echo. Martha walked past, her head high, Raphael joining her with a proud nod, their bond a quiet strength. Walter watched, his face ashen, the glass in his hand trembling. Martha's words, her poise, her triumph, they were a mirror to his failures. He saw her now, not as the woman he'd mocked, but as a force he'd never understood. The producers' words from the cafe echoed. She was your muse. He'd traded her depth for Sasha's dazzle, and now his world was a hollow shell. Sasha, oblivious, whispered about damage control. But Walter barely heard. His eyes followed Martha, her crimson dress ablaze against the ballroom's gold, her laughter soft as she spoke with Raphael. She was a star, and he was fading into her shadow. Raphael took the stage, his voice steady, commanding attention. "I dined at Soulfire Incognito," he said, "and found genius in every bite. Those rumors about Martha? Lies spread by envy." He looked towards Sasha, his gaze piercing, and the crowd murmured, heads turning. Her talent is real, her fire undeniable. Applause swelled again, Sasha's face paling as she sank into her seat. Martha stood at her table, her award gleaming, her fire earring catching the light. She met Walter's gaze for a fleeting moment, her eyes not cold, not vengeful, but simply done. She turned to Raphael, her smile warm, her heart alight with a victory earned through pain. The ballroom glowed, its chandeliers a constellation above, but Martha was the true star, her crimson dress a flame that warmed the night. She'd faced betrayal, rumors, and doubt, and emerged not just whole, but radiant. The awards continued, but her moment lingered, a spark that would carry her forward. The sea outside whispered, and Martha's fire burned brighter, ready for whatever came next. The ballroom's golden glow faded into the quiet hum of backstage shadows, where the air was thick with the aftertaste of triumph and champagne. The International Culinary Awards had crowned its heroes, and Martha, 29, stood at the heart of her victory, the glass flame of her breakout chef award cradled in her hands. Her crimson dress shimmered like embers under the dim lights, her natural curls loose and defiant, her fire-shaped earring, a gift from her grandmother, catching stray beams like a spark refusing to die. The applause still echoed in her ears, a tidal wave that had drowned Sasha's rumors and Walter's betrayal. Yet, as she moved through the backstage corridor, her step steady but her heart alert, she sensed a shadow lingering, one she'd once loved, now a ghost of her past. Walter, 32, waited in the half-light, his tailored suit creased, his once sharp jaw softened by sleepless nights. The man who'd mocked her as a small-time cook a year ago was a husk of his former self, his music empire crumbling, his dreams buried under Sasha's fleeting fame. He'd watched Martha's triumph from the ballroom, her crimson blaze, searing through his defenses, her words, "I cook for souls, not spotlights," a mirror to his hollow choices. Sasha had fled to salvage her image, her silver gown a fading flicker. But Walter stayed, driven by a need he couldn't name. Regret? Guilt? Or the desperate hope to reclaim a piece of the fire he'd cast away? His hands trembled as he stepped. Into her path, his voice a cracked whisper, "Martha." She stopped, her fire earring glinting, her eyes meeting his with a calm that cut deeper than anger. The corridor seemed to shrink, the distant clink of glasses and laughter fading into a hush. Walter swallowed, his throat dry, his words stumbling. "I was wrong," he said, his voice raw, each syllable heavy with the weight of a year's mistakes. "I didn't see you, not really. I'm sorry." His eyes, once cold with arrogance, now pleaded for something. Forgiveness, absolution. A way back to the man he'd been when Martha was his muse. Martha stood still, the glass flame cool against her palm, her heart a steady drum. She saw him now, not as the king who'd shattered her, but as a man undone by his own hands. The Walter who'd laughed with her over late-night recipes, who'd dreamed of music while she sketched dishes, was gone, replaced by this shadow chasing ghosts. She didn't hate him. Hate was a fire she'd let burn out. Instead, she felt a quiet clarity, a freedom hard-won through nights of doubt and dawn-lit kitchens. Her voice when it came was serene, a blade wrapped in silk. "You thought you dimmed my light," she said, her words soft but unyielding, "but you ignited my fire." Walter flinched, her truth a spark that burned through his fragile armor. He opened his mouth, grasping for words, but none came. Martha's gaze held his, not cruel, not vengeful, but simply done. A door closed, a chapter ended. Before he could speak, Raphael appeared, his salt and pepper hair catching the light. His presence steady as a hearth. His hand rested gently on Martha's back, a gesture of quiet strength, their bond unspoken but unbreakable. "Ready?" he asked, his voice warm, his eyes flicking to Walter with neither pity nor scorn. Martha nodded, her smile small but radiant, her fire earring blazing as she turned away. She and Raphael walked toward the ballroom's glow, their laughter a soft melody, their steps in sync like a dance learned through trust. Walter stood frozen, the corridor's shadows swallowing him. His hand clutched an old photo slipped from his wallet, a faded snapshot of Martha in their old apartment, laughing as she stirred a pot, her fire earring glinting even then. The producer's words from the cafe echoed, "She was your muse." He'd traded her depth for Sasha's dazzle, her soul for a spotlight that had long since dimmed. The photo trembled in his grip, a relic of a life he'd never reclaim. He sank against the wall, the glass flame of Martha's award a distant gleam in his mind, his heart a pile of ashes where embers no longer burned. Back in the ballroom, Martha stood among friends, Amara at her side, her baker's hands clapping with pride. The chandeliers cast golden webs, but Martha was the true light, her crimson dress a beacon that warmed the night. She laughed, her voice a song, her fire earring catching every glance. The rumors, the betrayal, the supplier's scorn, they were embers now, fueling a fire that no one could touch. Raphael raised a glass, his toast simple. To soul fire and the woman who built it. The crowd cheered, but Martha's eyes were on the horizon where the sea waited, its waves a promise of new dawns. The night stretched on, the ballroom alive with celebration, but Martha's heart was already home in soul fire, where the mural's flame danced, where her grandmother's recipes lived, where her fire burned brightest. Walter's apology, his brokenness, was a chapter closed, a weight lifted. She was free, not just from him, but from the doubt he'd sown. The stars outside winked, and Martha's fire blazed, a beacon for all who dared to rise. Martha's fire lit the night, a beacon born from betrayal's ashes. Her journey reminds us, our sparks can blaze through the darkest storms. What did her story stir in you? Drop your thoughts below. Did her courage inspire you, or did Walter's regret hit close to home? Your voice matters. Thank you for joining us, for letting soul fire warm your heart. Hit subscribe to catch more tales of triumph, and we'll meet again under the next starry sky. Until then, keep your fire burning.